I was 46 years old when I received a letter from a lawyer in Iowa informing me that my great-uncle Theodore had died and left me his farm. I'd never met Theodore. He was my grandmother's brother, estranged from the family for reasons no one would discuss. All I knew was that he'd lived alone on 200 acres outside Cedar Rapids for the past 50 years. The lawyer, a man named Gerald Winters, explained over the phone that Theodore had no other living relatives. The farm, the house, and all contents were mine if I wanted them. Otherwise, they'd be sold at auction to cover estate taxes. I had 2 weeks to decide. My life in Boston wasn't particularly fulfilling. I'd been divorced for 3 years, my marketing job felt increasingly meaningless, and my daughter was away at college. The idea of a fresh start, even temporarily, appealed to me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. I flew to Cedar Rapids on a grey October morning. Gerald met me at the airport, a weathered man in his 60s who'd clearly spent his life in small-town practice. He drove me to the property, making small talk about the area, carefully avoiding any mention of Theodore himself. The farm appeared through morning mist like something from a different century. A 2-story white farmhouse, paint peeling but structure solid. Several outbuildings in various states of decay. Fields lying fallow, overtaken by wild grasses. Everything spoke of long neglect and profound solitude. Theodore was eccentric, Gerald said, as we pulled up the gravel drive. Kept to himself, refused visitors, had groceries delivered to the mailbox at the road. The only time I saw him in 40 years of handling his affairs was when he updated his will 6 months ago. What did he do here all alone? No one knows. That was part of his eccentricity. The house has been empty since he died 3 weeks ago. No one's been inside except the sheriff to confirm the death, natural causes, by the way, heart attack in his sleep. Gerald handed me a set of keys. The house waited, full of secrets I couldn't yet imagine. The front door opened with a creak that suggested decades without oil. Inside, the house was surprisingly clean, not immaculate but orderly in a way that contradicted the exterior's decay. Theodore had maintained his living space even as he let the outside world crumble. The main floor was simple. A kitchen with appliances from the 70s, a living room with a single armchair facing a window overlooking the fields, a bathroom with ancient fixtures, everything functional but austere, as if Theodore had stripped life down to its absolute essentials. Gerald gave me a brief tour, pointing out the working well, the propane heating system, the electrical panel that was outdated but functional. You'll want to get inspections before deciding whether to keep or sell. The structure's sound, but systems need updating. He left me with paperwork to sign, a phone number to call with questions, and a promise to return in a week to discuss next steps. Then I was alone in the house of a man I'd never known, surrounded by the artifacts of his mysterious solitude. I spent the afternoon exploring. The kitchen cabinets held simple dishes, basic canned goods, evidence of a man who ate to survive rather than for pleasure. The living room bookshelf contained an eclectic mix: agricultural manuals, philosophy texts, military history, cryptography books. That last category was curious. Why would a farmer need to study cryptography? Upstairs were 3 bedrooms. 2 were completely empty, stripped of furniture, just bare floors and walls. The third had clearly been Theodore's. A single bed, neatly made, a small dresser, nothing personal except a photograph on the nightstand. It showed a young man in military uniform, 1940s era. Theodore, I assumed, during what must have been World War II service. Then I found the study. A small room at the end of the upstairs hallway, door closed but unlocked. Inside was different from the rest of the house. This room showed care, attention, purpose. A large oak desk dominated the space, its surface organized with military precision. Filing cabinets lined one wall. Bookshelves held more cryptography texts, military documents, and what appeared to be personal journals. I sat at the desk, feeling like an intruder in this clearly sacred space. Who had Theodore been, and why did this room feel less like a study and more like a command center? I stayed in the house that first night, sleeping in one of the empty bedrooms on an air mattress I'd brought from Boston. The silence was profound. No traffic, no sirens, no city sounds I'd grown accustomed to, just wind through old window frames and the settling of aged wood. Morning brought renewed exploration. I returned to the study, drawn by its obvious importance to Theodore. I began carefully going through the desk drawers, finding meticulous financial records going back decades, property documents, tax returns. Theodore had been methodical about documentation, but there was nothing personal. No letters, no diary entries, no photographs beyond the military portrait. The filing cabinets held more of the same. Agricultural records from years when he'd actually farmed the land, maintenance logs for equipment long since sold or scrapped, warranties for appliances. It was all so ordinary, which somehow made it more mysterious. Why had a man with Theodore's obvious intelligence and organizational skills chosen this isolated existence? I was pacing the study, frustrated by finding nothing unusual, when I heard it, a hollow sound beneath my feet. One section of the wooden floor sounded different from the rest. I knelt down, examining the boards more carefully. There, partially hidden by the desk leg, one board was slightly elevated above its neighbors. My heart rate increased as I moved the desk, its legs scraping across the floor with a sound that seemed obscenely loud in the quiet house. With the desk moved, I could see it clearly. One floorboard, about 3 feet long, that didn't quite sit flush with the others. I ran my fingers along its edges, feeling for a way to lift it. On one end, I found a small notch, barely visible, clearly intentional. I wedged my fingernail into it and pulled. The board lifted easily, revealing darkness beneath. I used my phone's flashlight to peer into the space. A trapdoor, not just a hollow space under a loose board, but an actual constructed door with hinges and a latch. Someone, Theodore certainly, had built this deliberately, carefully concealing it beneath the study floor. The latch was simple but sturdy. I took a breath, then pulled it open. A wooden ladder descended into darkness. I had no idea how deep it went or what waited below. I went to my car and retrieved the camping flashlight I'd packed, telling myself I was being cautious, not cowardly. The rational part of my brain said this was probably just a root cellar or storm shelter. The growing unease I felt suggested otherwise. The ladder descended 12 feet into a chamber carved from earth and reinforced with timber supports. As I climbed down, my flashlight revealed a room approximately 15 feet square, walls lined with shelves, a small desk in one corner, and most striking, a massive corkboard covering one entire wall, filled with papers, photographs, and strings, connecting various elements in patterns I couldn't immediately decipher. The air was cool and dry. Theodore had clearly taken measures to preserve whatever he'd stored here. I reached the bottom of the ladder and stood, sweeping my flashlight across the space systematically. The shelves held file boxes, all carefully labeled with codes I didn't understand. The desk held more journals, these different from the mundane accounting above. These were numbered sequentially, volumes 1 through 47. But it was the corkboard that captured my attention. I approached it slowly, my flashlight beam catching on black and white photographs, newspaper clippings yellowed with age, handwritten notes in Theodore's precise script, and colored strings creating a web of connections between elements. The photographs showed various people, men mostly, some in military uniform, some in civilian clothes, spanning decades from what I could tell. The newspaper clippings were from different time periods too, ranging from the 1940s to just a few years ago. Headlines jumped out: Diplomat dies in mysterious accident. Defense contractor suicide deemed suspicious. Retired general's home invaded. Nothing stolen. The strings connected these articles to photographs, to notes that referenced dates and locations, creating a pattern that was clearly meaningful but completely incomprehensible to me. At the center of the board, pinned with unusual prominence, was a photograph of a man in his 30s, military uniform, standing beside a woman. The man looked familiar. It took me a moment to realize it was Theodore, 50 years younger. The woman was beautiful, blonde, smiling at the camera with the confidence of someone who knew her power. Beneath the photo, Theodore had written a single name: Evelyn. I pulled one of the journals from the desk, Volume 1, dated 1969. Theodore's handwriting was small, precise, every entry dated and timed like military logs. I flipped through pages, trying to understand what I was reading. The early entries were cryptic, coordinates, names I didn't recognize, brief observations about movements and meetings. But as I read further, a pattern emerged. Theodore had been tracking someone, or multiple someones, recording their activities, their associations, building a case for something. I grabbed Volume 10, dated 1975. The entries were more detailed now, filled with analysis and theory. Theodore wrote about Operation Compromise, about assets embedded at highest levels, about evidence destroyed but patterns remain. He was investigating something, but what and why? Volume 20, from 1987, was different in tone, more personal. Evelyn confirmed sighting in Brussels. She hasn't aged as she should. Cosmetic surgery or something else? The pattern holds. They operate in plain sight because no one believes they exist. Who were they? I flipped to the back of the volume where Theodore had drawn organizational charts showing connections between corporations, government agencies, and individuals. Lines drawn and redrawn, connections made and questioned, an obsessive attempt to map an organization he clearly believed was real and dangerous. The latest journal, Volume 47 from this past year, was the most unsettling. Theodore's writing was shakier now, the hand of an old man, but no less determined. They know I know. The surveillance is obvious now. They want me to know they're watching, but I'm old and alone. What threat do I pose? Still, precautions necessary. Have updated, Will. If nephew finds this, hope he's wiser than I was. So Theodore had known I might discover all this, had intended me to find it. But why? What did he expect me to do with this information? I stood in that hidden room, surrounded by decades of obsessive investigation, and felt both privileged and burdened by this inheritance I hadn't asked for. Outside, I heard a car approaching on the gravel drive. My stomach clenched. Who would be visiting? Gerald said no one came here. I climbed the ladder quickly, replacing the floorboard and moving the desk back into position. By the time I reached the front door, someone was knocking. Through the door's window, I saw a woman, perhaps 60 years old, well-dressed in a way that seemed out of place for rural Iowa. She wore a tailored coat, her grey hair styled professionally, her posture suggesting confidence and authority. When she saw me looking, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Foster, Daniel Foster. I'm Catherine Moore. I represent a foundation that's interested in acquiring this property. I understand you've just inherited it." "How do you know my name? How did you even know I was here?" Her smile never wavered. "Small community. Word travels. Gerald Winters mentioned at the diner that Theodore's nephew was visiting to assess the property. We've had our eye on this land for some time." Something about her precision bothered me. Gerald had been careful not to mention Theodore's eccentricity to others, he told me. Would he have casually discussed my presence at a diner? "What foundation?" "The Midlands Agricultural Preservation Society. We acquire properties of historical significance, preserve them, maintain the land sustainably. we'd be prepared to offer you well above market value, say $3 million for the property and all contents. $3 million for a rundown farm? Even I knew that was absurd. That's generous. But I haven't decided what I'm doing with the property yet. Of course, I don't mean to pressure you, but our offer won't remain open indefinitely. We have other properties we're considering. She handed me a business card. Expensive stock, embossed lettering. Think about it. You could return to Boston, to your life with financial security. This place holds nothing for you. The way she said, your life, made it clear she knew more about me than my name and presence here. I'll consider it. Thank you. After she left, I examined the card. The foundation's address was in Chicago. I pulled out my phone and searched for them. The website was professional, showing various rural properties they'd preserved. But something felt wrong. The site was too polished, too perfect, like it had been created recently to establish legitimacy rather than document years of genuine work. I thought about Theodore's journals, about the woman named Evelyn, who operated in plain sight because no one believes they exist. Was I being paranoid? Or had Theodore's conspiracy theories just become my reality? I spent the next 3 days immersed in Theodore's hidden archive. The more I read, the clearer his investigation became, and the more frightened I grew. Theodore had been tracking what he believed was a long-term intelligence operation, possibly dating back to World War II, involving embedded assets in government, military, and corporate sectors. The name Evelyn appeared repeatedly throughout the decades. Theodore documented sightings, always distant, always uncertain, but persistent. In 1969, Evelyn had been photographed at a diplomatic reception in Paris. In 1982, a woman matching her description was seen at a defense contractor conference. In 2003, she appeared in the background of a photo from a classified military briefing. Theodore had obtained the photo through what must have been substantial effort and risk. The impossible part was that if these were all the same woman, she should have aged 50 years. Instead, Theodore's notes suggested she looked barely older than in that original photo from the 60s. Cosmetic surgery, he'd written initially, then questioned it, then abandoned that theory entirely. His final conclusion: identity assumed by successive operatives using same name and similar appearance to maintain continuity of asset. But that seemed almost as impossible. Why would an intelligence operation bother with such elaborate continuity? Theodore had a theory, outlined in his later journals. Long-term placement requires long-term cover. If same person maintains connections over decades, those connections become unquestionable. The asset becomes institution rather than individual. I found another section of the corkboard dedicated to what Theodore called the pattern. He'd documented deaths, accidents, and disappearances of individuals who'd been investigating or had knowledge of classified operations. Over 40 years, he'd tracked 73 such incidents. His methodology was explained in a journal. I search obituaries of former intelligence and military personnel. I look for unusual circumstances. When pattern emerges, multiple incidents cluster around specific time periods or investigations, I investigate further. The most recent entry was dated 6 months ago, just before Theodore updated his will. Pattern emerging again. 3 deaths in past year, all retired analysts who worked on Soviet penetration operations in 70s. Officially, 1 heart attack, 1 car accident, 1 fall. Unofficially, all had recently been contacted by researcher writing book about Cold War intelligence operations. Researcher also died. Suicide. Pattern too clear to ignore, they're cleaning up. Reading this, I realized Theodore had believed he might be next. Had his heart attack truly been natural, or had someone ensured an old man's investigation ended with him? On the 4th morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under the front door. No postmark, no return address, just my name written in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Your uncle was paranoid and delusional. Don't waste your life on his fantasies. Sell the farm and go home. This is friendly advice. Not signed, not threatening exactly, but the implication was clear. Someone knew I'd found the hidden room, knew I'd been reading the journals. How? I'd been careful, replacing the floorboard each time, giving no external indication of what I'd discovered, unless the house was monitored. I began checking walls, outlets, anywhere a camera or listening device might be hidden. I found nothing, but that didn't mean nothing was there. Surveillance technology had advanced far beyond what an amateur search would detect. I called Gerald Winters. Did anyone else have keys to this house? Just me and the sheriff. Why? Someone's been here. Left a note under the door. Probably just locals being nosy. Your arrival is probably the most interesting thing that's happened around here in years. Gerald, what can you tell me about Theodore? Really tell me. You said he was eccentric, but that's vague. Long pause. Daniel, I'm your lawyer now, handling the estate, but I was Theodore's lawyer for 40 years. What he told me is privileged. He's dead, and I think whatever he was involved in isn't finished. Another pause. Longer. Meet me at the diner in town, not the house, 30 minutes. The diner was exactly what I expected. Small, worn, authentic. Gerald was already there, looking uncomfortable. We took a booth in the back. He waited until the waitress brought coffee before speaking. Theodore came to me in 1969, fresh back from Vietnam. He had documents, photos, evidence he claimed proved something massive, an intelligence operation that had gone wrong or gone rogue. He wasn't sure which. He wanted to know his legal options. And? I told him the truth. He had nothing actionable. His evidence was circumstantial, his theories were unprovable, and pursuing it would destroy his life. He'd be labeled paranoid, discredited, possibly worse. But he pursued it anyway. Gerald nodded. For 50 years, he became obsessed, pushed away family, friends, anyone who might be collateral damage. He chose this isolation deliberately to protect others and to protect his investigation. Do you think he was crazy? Gerald met my eyes. I think he believed what he found. Whether it was real or delusion, I can't say. But I know 3 things. Theodore was highly intelligent, he was methodical, and he was scared, genuinely, deeply scared, of something. I returned to the farm with Gerald's words echoing in my mind. Theodore had been scared. Scared enough to isolate himself completely, scared enough to document everything obsessively, scared enough to leave it all to me as some kind of warning or call to action. But what action? What did Theodore expect me to do? I was a marketing executive, not an investigator. I had no intelligence training, no resources, no idea how to pursue something like this, even if I believed it was real. I climbed down to the hidden room again, this time bringing my laptop. I began photographing everything, the corkboard, the journals, every document Theodore had preserved. If nothing else, I'd have a record of his investigation. I spent hours documenting, organizing, trying to understand the full scope of what Theodore had uncovered. That evening, as darkness fell, I heard vehicles approaching, multiple vehicles. I looked out the upstairs window to see 3 black SUVs pulling up the drive, unmarked, government style. My heart rate spiked. Was I being paranoid, or was this exactly what Theodore had feared? 6 people emerged from the vehicles, all wearing dark suits, all moving with professional coordination. One approached the front door, while the others took positions around the house. I had maybe 30 seconds before they knocked. I made a split-second decision. I grabbed my laptop and phone, ran to the study, and descended into the hidden room. At the bottom, I closed the trapdoor as quietly as possible, then repositioned the ladder so I could brace the trapdoor from below. It wouldn't stop a determined search, but it might buy me time. The knock came, loud and authoritative. "Mr. Foster, federal agents, we need to speak with you regarding your uncle's property." I held my breath, standing in darkness, listening to footsteps moving through the house above me. They were searching, methodically checking each room. I heard furniture moving, doors opening, closets being checked. They were being thorough. Then I heard it. Footsteps in the study above me, directly overhead. Someone walking slowly, carefully, examining the space. My muscles tensed, ready to... What? There was no escape from here. If they found the trapdoor, I was trapped. "Nothing up here," a voice called. "You sure he's even here? No car in the drive?" Could have walked into town, or could be hiding. Keep looking. You see, they searched for another 30 minutes, their footsteps moving through the house, checking everywhere. I stood in complete darkness, not daring to use my phone's light, barely breathing. Finally, I heard them gathering near the front door. He's not here. Maybe he did take our advice and left. Or he's in town. Check the diner, the hotel. Find him. The vehicle started, then departed. But I waited another hour in the darkness before moving. This could be a trick. They might have left someone watching the house, waiting for me to reveal the hidden room. When I finally climbed back up, it was completely dark. The house was exactly as I'd left it, but now it felt violated, unsafe. They'd been through everything, searching for something, for me, for Theodore's documents. Both. I had to make a decision. I could take Catherine Moore's offer, sell everything, return to Boston with money and pretend I'd never found the hidden room. Or I could pursue this further, understanding that doing so might put me in danger. Theodore had spent 50 years on this investigation. Was I willing to risk anything? My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We know you're there. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it and walk away or face consequences. You have 24 hours. Return what? The journals, the documents. I hadn't taken anything from the house. Unless they meant knowledge itself, the information Theodore had gathered. Could I return that by destroying it, by pretending I'd never seen it? I thought about my daughter, about my simple life in Boston, about how I'd been feeling directionless. This was direction, certainly, but toward what? Danger, paranoia, or something real that Theodore had spent his life documenting? I made my choice. I photographed the text message, then began systematically uploading all the photos I'd taken in the hidden room to encrypted cloud storage. If something happened to me, at least Theodore's investigation wouldn't be lost. Then I packed the most critical journals and documents into a waterproof bag, along with my laptop. I knew the property had old storm drains and culverts. Theodore's agricultural records showed their locations. One led from near the barn to a drainage outlet half a mile away. I could use it to leave unseen. Before I left, I went through the house one final time, looking at it with new understanding. This had been Theodore's fortress, his command center, his lonely prison. He'd given up everything for his investigation. I was about to follow in his footsteps, and I had no idea where they'd lead. I emerged from the drainage culvert in darkness, covered in mud and cobwebs, but undetected. I'd walked 2 miles cross-country to the nearest gas station, where I caught a cab to Cedar Rapids. I checked into a budget motel under a fake name, paying cash, aware I was probably being paranoid, but unable to ignore the fear Theodore's documents had instilled. In the motel room, I began serious research. If Theodore's investigation was real, there should be corroborating evidence somewhere. I started with the names from his documents, the people he'd been tracking, the incidents he'd documented. Many were deceased, obituaries confirming the circumstances Theodore had described. The pattern he'd identified was verifiable. Clusters of deaths around specific time periods, unusual circumstances, connections to classified operations. I found academic papers about intelligence operations during the Cold War. Some mentioned operations that had gone wrong, assets that had disappeared, investigations that had been quietly closed. Nothing conclusive, but enough to suggest Theodore hadn't been entirely delusional. Then I found something interesting. One of the names from Theodore's documents, Dr. James Mitchell, deceased 2003, fall from apartment balcony, had a daughter who'd written a blog post years ago questioning her father's death. She'd been told it was suicide, but her father had no history of depression, had been planning a vacation, had shown no warning signs. I contacted her through the blog, carefully vague about my reasons. She responded within hours. "Are you investigating my father's death? Please. I've waited 20 years for someone to believe me." We arranged to meet in Chicago, neutral ground. She was 52, a professor of history, intelligent and careful. We met in a coffee shop, and I showed her selected documents from Theodore's collection, nothing that would put her in danger, but enough to show my interest was legitimate. Her reaction was immediate tears. Someone else saw it. Someone else documented the pattern. I thought I was going crazy, seeing conspiracies everywhere, but my father didn't kill himself. I know he didn't. She told me what she knew. Her father had been a CIA analyst in the 70s and 80s, specializing in Soviet operations. After retirement, he'd been contacted by a journalist researching Cold War intelligence failures. They'd met several times, her father sharing unclassified information. 3 weeks after their last meeting, the journalist died, car accident. 2 weeks after that, my father fell from his balcony. 2 other analysts who'd spoken to the same journalist died within 6 months, 1 heart attack, 1 drowning. I returned to the farm 2 days later, deliberately, in daylight. If they were watching, and I was certain they were, I wanted them to know I'd returned. I'd made copies of everything, stored them in multiple locations. Whatever happened now, Theodore's investigation would survive. Catherine Moore was waiting on the front porch when I arrived. Not hiding, not pretending to be surprised. Just sitting in one of the old rocking chairs, as if she owned the place. "Mr. Foster, I wondered when you'd return. Who are you, really? You're not with any agricultural preservation society. I'm with an organization that manages sensitive historical information. Your uncle accumulated material that was classified, stolen, or both. We need to recover it. Theodore's been dead for a month. Why didn't you recover it while he was alive? We tried. He was uncooperative. And we hoped his death would end the matter. But then you arrived, found his hidden room, started uploading documents to the internet. That's problematic. So they had been monitoring everything, cameras in the house or tracking my devices or both. The documents are already distributed, multiple copies in multiple locations. If anything happens to me, they'll be released. Catherine smiled, and this time it seemed genuine. You watch too many movies. We don't disappear people. We negotiate, we persuade, we occasionally prosecute for theft of classified material, but we don't murder civilians over conspiracy theories. What about Dr. Mitchell, the journalist, the 73 deaths Theodore documented? Coincidence, selection bias, and an old man's paranoia. James Mitchell had been depressed. Medical records confirm it. The journalist had been driving drunk. The other incidents were thoroughly investigated at the time. By whom? Your organization. By proper authorities. Look, Daniel, your uncle was a decorated veteran who came home from Vietnam with undiagnosed PTSD. He fixated on patterns that didn't exist, built a fantasy around a woman he'd loved and lost, and spent 50 years chasing ghosts. It's sad, but it's not sinister. Then why are you here? Why do you care what I do with his documents?" Catherine stood, brushing imaginary dust from her coat. "Because fiction that looks like truth can cause real damage. People believe conspiracy theories. They act on them. Your uncle's carefully documented evidence could inspire violence, harassment of innocent people whose names appear in his files, or disclosure of genuinely classified material that could endanger ongoing operations. So it's real? Some of it? Some of what Theodore documented was real. Intelligence operations that are now declassified, historical events that are public record. But his interpretation, a shadow organization operating for decades, a mysterious woman who doesn't age, systematic murder of whistleblowers, that's fiction built on selective facts. Catherine left me with a thick folder. Everything we have on Theodore, medical records, service records, the actual classified documents he stole. Yes, he did steal some, which is why we're involved. Read it. Then decide whether you want to continue his investigation or move on with your life. I spent 3 days reading. The file was comprehensive. Theodore had served in Vietnam in an intelligence unit. He'd been part of an operation that went wrong, resulting in casualties, including a female CIA officer named Evelyn Sanders. Theodore had blamed himself, had become obsessed with the idea that she'd been deliberately sacrificed, that the operation had been compromised from within. After his discharge, he'd pursued this theory for years. The documents he'd stolen were related to that operation, obtained through various means over decades. They showed nothing definitive. Communication breakdowns, bad intelligence, unfortunate timing. But no smoking gun, no evidence of betrayal or conspiracy. The rest of Theodore's investigation built on this foundation of grief and guilt. Every incident he'd documented could be explained conventionally. The pattern he'd seen was real, but the conclusion he'd drawn, that they were connected murders, was unsupported. People in dangerous professions died in accidents. Analysts with access to stress-inducing information suffered heart attacks and depression. It wasn't conspiracy, it was statistics. The woman he'd tracked as Evelyn across decades, multiple different women who resembled the CIA officer he'd lost. His mind, wanting her to be alive, had created continuity where none existed. I sat in Theodore's study, my study now, and felt the weight of his wasted life. 50 years of isolation, investigation, obsession, all based on a foundation of grief and trauma. He'd been a brilliant man who'd needed psychological help, and instead had chosen conspiracy. But I also understood why. Sometimes the random cruelty of the universe is harder to accept than malevolent design. Theodore had needed the operation's failure to mean something, to be someone's fault, because accepting it was just bad luck would have been unbearable. I decided to sell the farm, not to Catherine's organization. That felt like capitulation. But to a genuine agricultural preservation group. I donated Theodore's non-classified documents to a university library specializing in veterans' oral histories, properly contextualized as one man's attempt to process trauma. The classified documents I returned through proper channels, accepting that I might face legal consequences. I didn't. The government seemed relieved to recover them quietly rather than create publicity through prosecution. I returned to Boston different than I'd left. Theodore's life was a cautionary tale about the cost of refusing to heal, of choosing investigation over peace. But it was also a reminder that everyone carries unseen burdens, that the crazy old hermit had been a decorated soldier who'd never recovered from losing someone he loved. I visited Theodore's grave before leaving Iowa, a simple military headstone in a small country cemetery. I told him I'd found his hidden room, read his journals, understood what drove him, and I forgave him for the lonely life he'd lived, the family he'd pushed away, the obsession that consumed him. Sometimes forgiveness is the only inheritance that matters.